get older, you go short.
I know, I'm up and down all the time. Who knows what I'll end up with. I go back to short because I like it.
It's easy.
It is.
Hello. See why people do it.
Thank you. You're welcome.
But yeah.
Thank you.
I did all.
That's all we do.
Yeah.
She could be
Where'd
a
you
personal
go?
shopper. We ended up at Steinmart. And she
I've been there forever since they moved over that way. Because it used to be out by me.
and we didn't even go to the one in Colorado. We're by, gosh,
Yes.
and so she goes, "We need this. This could go with jeans."
Somebody didn't do that.
Same thing you said.
I know. I love it.
It doesn't. Thank you.
Actually, at a regular meeting.
I saw her in here.
Oh, I just stopped and thought, no, I just thought it was good.
Rick, we're good, by the way. I just confirmed. Oh, good. No council action required. Who's doing the invocation? Are you doing the invocation? I'm going to ask for a moment of silence for Chris Clay prior to it, if you don't mind. I'm going to ask for a quick moment of silence.
And they're going for 407.
Oh, ACC is taking care of some.
Across the street.
I was just sick when I saw that.
Yes.
Doug said that there's a GoFundMe page.
A GoFund, I think there is.
Oh, really? Love to, if somebody could send me a link to that, I'd love to disseminate. Okay, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the City Council regular meeting. Please prepare for the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance. Before we move on with the invocation, I would like to ask for a moment of silence for Chris Clay, who unfortunately passed last week in a tragic accident. Chris Clay has been a very active member of our community, and she will be sorely missed. I think many of you have probably met her in this room. She was a common attendee at council meetings, so if we could just have a moment of silence for her. Thank you.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, I just thank you for bringing us here this evening to discuss the business of the city. I just ask, Lord, that you would be with us, you would give us your wisdom and your direction, and that we would come to conclusions that are in the best interest of the city. Lord, and I just lift up Chris Clay's family to you, ask that you would be close to them in this time. All these things we ask in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I know that if anybody would like to know some additional things to do for the Clay family, Doug Cohn has been in touch with them, and I think they have a GoFundMe page, and there's been some things on Nextdoor. So I'm sure when we find out when any services are, we'll make sure that that's available as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Here. Members Olson,
Good evening.
Barentine,
Here.
Gillett,
Present.
Martinez,
Present.
Russell,
Here.
Yates,
Present.
and Mayor Jefferson.
Here.
All 7 present.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5. This is consideration of minutes of previous session. At this time, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, moved we accept the minutes for 20 March 2017 as presented. Second.
Thank you. Any amendments or comments? Seeing none, please vote.
I'm sorry. I must abstain.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 6 ayes and 1 abstention, the 1 abstention being Councilmember Olson.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6. This is recognition of scheduled public comment. Our first speaker this evening is Coween Dickerson, an Englewood resident, addressing council regarding communications. Good evening, Mrs. Dickerson.
Good evening. Coween Dickerson, 2835 South Pennsylvania, here in Englewood. The right to life is the source of all rights, and property is its implementation. All citizens have a right to their property and a property in their rights. The Constitution, which takes precedence over the state and the city, especially over ordinances affecting life, liberty, and property, ensures the rights of individuals. Last week, I was asked to indicate a few of the ordinances that fringe on property rights. That would be most of them. I have yet to find many that do not infringe on individual property rights, except the ones relating to the type of business allowed in certain zones. There are many that have been obviated by citizen initiatives, yet remain on the books to devil and tyrannize individuals and deny or deprive them of their property rights. For instance, the 2011 initiative that prohibited the city from restricting the number of vehicles, whether they're operating or not, supersedes and should have voided the ordinance restricting the number of non-op vehicles to 1 per address. Code enforcement is violating individual property rights in a number of very unconstitutional and illegal ways by selective enforcement, misinterpretation, and outright trespass. It is at least an abuse of power for code enforcement or police to have this over property rights and rights to property. Individuals have been targeted under a number of ordinances that have been applied through initial violation of property rights. Fences have been illegally torn down by adjacent new property owners, and complaints filed by the person or persons who violated a long-term neighbor's property rights. Code enforcement has committed further violation of rights by accessing second-story buildings that have just gotten built and claim because a property's condition can be viewed from a new second story, therefore they have the right and the obligation to abate that property, even though they refuse to do anything about blatant violations in other areas. That is abuse, discriminatory, selective, and tyrannical, and it caters to developers. Who needs to keep his property in the form of developer, may be out of state, certainly out of the city, how he wants it. No one has the right to demand their neighbor meet their standards. Stop the abuse. Eliminate most ordinances and punishments. Be constitutional, and perhaps even eliminate code enforcement altogether, or at least make it a way to help citizens. After all, staff and police work for citizens. We don't work for them or for you. Our acting city attorney has bollocksed up the law and enforcement around here long enough by instructing the police not to enforce certain state laws that he would not be prosecuting anyway, and deliberately or ignorantly misinterpreting judicial decisions and incompetently instructing code enforcement and police to go after individuals on the say-so or complaint of cronies or influential citizens and or public officials. Which brings up another issue of property in rights and right to property. That of the sex offender law is amended. We have yet to see that wording. I believe Cohn erred in saying no new reading before it becomes final. I am concerned that it leaves long-term homeowners or residents who may or will commit crimes that require registration in legal limbo. Another ridiculous ordinance now being enforced again is the one regarding animal excrement in yards. How utterly obnoxious and vile to hold homeowners responsible for what strays, neighbors walking their dogs and not picking up after them, and coyotes, foxes, and raccoons might do. Another ordinance not directly relating to property rights has to do with the citizen initiative regarding recreational marijuana and the existing MedMJ ordinance. There's a big disconnect with the medical marijuana ordinance and the initiative. I think this needs to be revised. Given its poor wording of distancing in stores, there is a possibility that now there might be another one up against residential. I think we should limit the number of rec stores as well as the number of med stores. Something has to be coordinated between the two.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll see if council has any questions for you this evening. Mayor Pro Tem Gillett.
Thank you, Ms. Dickerson, for coming. We'll start this off by saying, while I don't always agree with everything you say, I will defend your right to say it. One of the things you mentioned that I take very serious is you accused our code enforcement officers of trespassing. Do you have direct examples of that, or is it hearsay?
No, I've seen it.
Can you tell us where?
The fact that they a developer took down a fence and left a property unsecured. It wasn't their fence to take down. Then they made a complaint, and code enforcement came over and went on the second floor of the new building when that property had been in that condition for at least 10 to 15 years before. And I consider that trespass. They came onto his property when the fence was down, and they went into a second floor, and they justified their actions as, well, it can be seen from a second floor. But that property was purchased and developed knowing the condition of the property.
Thank you. Do you have that address by chance?
Yes?
Would you please send it to us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions from council, I'll thank you, Mrs. Dickerson, for coming and speaking this evening. Our next speaker is Joel Barr, an Englewood resident, will address council regarding the Boys and Girls Club. Is Mr. Barr here this evening?
Point of information, Mayor. Mr. Barr indicated that he will not be attending tonight.
Thank you. Moving on to our third speaker is Doug Cohn, an Englewood resident, will address council regarding historic preservation. Good evening, Mr. Cohn.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I passed out a sheet with some pictures on it. Those are pictures of a corner grocery store. It was Herman McCready's grocery store back in 1910. In 1910, Englewood was 7 years old, and it was just beginning to coalesce from being scattered farms to actually having a city. A man came into town seeing an opportunity to put in a grocery store. At that point, we didn't have Safeway and King Soopers and Walmarts and all those things. There were a whole bunch of little neighborhood stores. This fellow, Mr. McCready, was a immigrant from Canada. He came to Colorado and farmed in Delta for a while, then tried his hand at gold mining, and wasn't very successful with that, at least didn't like it, and moved to Larimer Street and set up a little grocery store there, and was pretty successful with it. One of his main groups of clients were the women who worked nights, and he left the back door open so that there wouldn't be a problem for the guys who came in the front door. In 1910, he saw an opportunity in Englewood. There was a new Swedish sanitarium had just opened up for people who had what's it called?
Tuberculosis.
Excuse me, thank you. Mine just went blank. Tuberculosis, and the houses were being built in the area, so he put together this little store, and he ran the store for from 1910 to 1930 when he died, and then his relatives sold the store, and the McCready grocery store became the red and white grocery store. There's the picture on the top. If you look at it real carefully, in the shadow you can see, hopefully, a horse and carriage. And the horse and carriage came from the Redbird Farms. I'm still doing research on those guys, where the Alameda Nursery is, over on Cohn and Dartmouth. That was where the Redbird Farm was. And they supplied the meat and the eggs and the butter and the milk to McCready and later to the Redbird store, or Red and White store. Anyway, as you're traveling around town and you look real carefully, you can see some buildings that have a corner cutout or a false front on them, And it'd be kind of fun to find out about all those different places that used to be the little neighborhood stores before Safeway and King Soopers and Walmart and Target got here. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohn. Let's see if council has any questions for you this evening. Councilmember Yates?
Is this the property off of Girard?
Yes, that's Gerard and Grant.
So it's the one that your family owns?
It is, right. Yeah, my father-in-law bought it in 1972, and then my wife and I bought it from him in 1982.
I like the way it looks in the picture more so.
Well, me too, yeah. We need to take out all that asphalt.
Other questions from council? Seeing none.
Thank you.
I hit the wrong one.
Councilmember Barentine.
It says here a rumor around suggests that some of the ladies from downtown Denver moved to Englewood around that same time and lived upstairs, and have not been able to confirm that. First of all, that's an insinuation that all of the ladies from downtown Denver, that sounds a little shady. And how much work did you do to confirm that? Or not confirm that?
The report was in the Englewood Examiner newspaper from 1978, a story about the building. And I got a hold of the great-granddaughter of McCready. She lives out in Thornton. And actually, she's the one who sent me the pictures and told me most of the story. She was the one who said, well, there were some women who were formerly prostitutes who came out here to be rehabilitated. But so the story changed a little bit.
Oh, okay.
They wanted to get away from the big city.
As long as they came to Englewood to be rehabilitated.
Right.
Well, we don't know that they got rehabilitated right away, but we know they came. That's awesome. Yep. Everybody has to work. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Mr. Cohn. Moving on to our final scheduled speaker, this is Art Emison addressing council regarding his property. Good evening, Mr. Emison.
Good evening, Council. My name is Arthur Emison. I own some property on West Adriatic Place, 2360 West Adriatic Place. I'm having problems with city staff. I'm here tonight to ask for a meeting with City Council, jointly with city staff. I'm feeling like a working session where we can provide and exchange facts that I'm not able to get directly from city staff would be appropriate. I have a lot of information. There's a lot of issue, but we're at the level where if we can't work this out, it ends up going to court, and that just doesn't seem appropriate. This needs to be worked out. So I look forward to hearing from you guys and getting a time when we can sit around the table. It may be appropriate to go on site, but I'd like to meet. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Let me see if council has any questions for you this evening. Councilmember Barentine, is that a question for Mr. Emison?
That was left over from the last one, but I do. Is it possible for us to just get a synopsis from the city manager on what we think the issue is so that we're not sitting here discussing it tonight? He could give that to you and you could provide it to us and we could make some decision after that. Is that okay?
There is quite a few emails exchanged between me and city staff. And, of course, I'm happy to provide those.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Emison. Moving on to agenda item 7, this is recognition of unscheduled public comment. We do have one speaker signed up this evening, and that is Don Krakowski, here to speak about the topic of alleys. Come on forward, sir. Did I butcher your name?
No, you got it right. Don Krakowski. I'm a resident of Englewood, and I'm developing some property on Broadway. The old Hilltop Motel will become something else. And in the process of doing this, I have to point out the alleys are not paved. Now, I'm sure you all know this, but we're in the 21st century. Broadway is one of the historic thoroughfares of Denver. It's kind of shocking that it's not paved. Now, I'm going to be putting $1 million into this thing. I have to pave my own alley, I realize. However, if it's left in this manner, do you really expect every person who shows up to pave in their own manner? Isn't it better to have the alleys paved? we have internet, we have all sorts of interesting things and very high tech. We could at least pave our roads. Now, I'm told that by the Englewood Development Agency here, whom I talk to a lot, that they're my partner. Well, partner, step up, pave the alley. So I have 3 specific questions. Is there a program in place? I know there's never enough money, but is there a program in place, number 1? If not, when? I should ask why. And I'd like to see some kind of timetable. It's from my property is at the corner of Lehigh and Broadway, and from my property to the next exit, should you be so as unfortunate as to have to go down the alley, it's about 200 yards of canyons and valleys, mud and snow. Really, not passable for a car that doesn't have 4-wheel drive sometimes. This is Broadway. It's unacceptable. So this is my first time here and my first questioning about this. I'm a little surprised. So I would ask, is there a program in place?
We'll get an opportunity to respond to public comment here in just a moment, sir, but this is your opportunity to make your comments here.
Okay, I've made my comment.
Thank you, sir. Let's see if council has any questions for you this evening. Mayor Pro Tem Gillett?
Would you let us know what business you're putting in there?
Sure. You want to see a picture? I have one. I can pass it around.
I think we do, if you wouldn't mind providing it to the city clerk.
It's going to be mixed use. I was shamelessly inspired by Union Station. Englewood is prominent. I'll show you.
Mayor Pro Tem, any further questions?
That's it. I was just curious.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine?
It'll be 3-story, residential floor 2 and 3, commercial floor 1. I hope to get 1 restaurant. A person in the neighborhood who I think probably has council aspirations has done a survey of the neighborhood and actually asked them and did a PowerPoint presentation for me as to what they want. Most of the neighbors would like a cafe or a restaurant, so I'm going to go looking for a cafe or restaurant.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine, questions?
If you went with the survey, you'd be doing it as a park. However, that was Nathan, and I'm glad that you've got this very interesting picture. When did you purchase the property?
3 years ago. I don't know why.
How many units were you planning on this? Are you working with our community development currently on this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. How many units residential?
Well, there'll be about 3,000 square foot of retail at the bottom and probably 8 units on total, 4 on each floor. Mountain View.
Thank you for sharing the picture with us. I appreciate it. I'd love for you to contact me. We can have a further discussion on alleys.
Councilmember Olson?
Yeah, I would like an alley because, in fact, my parking situation is quite good. However, I'm using the fact that there's an alley behind me as a means of entrance and egress. Quite important. So,
thank you, sir. If we could just stick to the questions, I apologize.
I would love to share my 20 years of conversation on alleys with you. We'll have coffee.
Councilmember Olson also has some questions
for you, sir.
One other question, sir.
So you said that you were a resident of Englewood also? You live here?
Yeah.
Where exactly do you live? Do you not have alleys in your neighborhood?
Yeah, until recently my street wasn't even paved, but somebody paved it. I live at 4 Wynwood Drive.
Oh, okay. So you have an unpaved alley as well?
Not anymore.
Oh, okay. It is now. That's helpful. Thank you.
Where are you at in Englewood?
4 Wynwood.
Oh, wait a minute.
Not.
That's not the city of Englewood, actually. It's
Well,
next to Arapahoe County.
my address is Englewood 80113.
Mailing address.
The mailing address, yeah.
Appreciate your time, and thank you for coming and speaking this evening, sir. We'll have an opportunity for response in just a moment.
And 3800 South Broadway is right in the smack dab in the middle of Englewood.
Yes, sir.
Would you like your picture back?
Well, we would fight over it.
Thank you.
Pieces.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Let's move on to council response to public comment. Would anybody like to kick us off? Councilmember Barentine.
I do share some of Coween's concerns. Ms. Dickerson has brought up that it does appear sometimes to people that there is an inequitable enforcement. And when you have a developer all of a sudden come and take down that fence, which they admitted they did, and then all of a sudden he's interested in buying property in those 3 lots, and a fight's been going on with the city for 20 years back and forth with this property, and then all of a sudden a developer's interested in it, and 11 people in community development staff show up to this man's property. It does start to look like maybe we're getting involved in a weird way in trying to push something along that a developer wants because all of a sudden somebody's interested in the property. I don't believe that that is the case. We are looking into it. I know Doug Cohn has been part of this process as well, but I do understand how that gives the appearance of it. And so I appreciate your bringing that to our attention, because appearance means everything in that, and this has been going on for 20 years, so I'm sure it'll get resolved. As far as the animal excrement, I still believe that they need to prove it's 72 hours old, and as soon as we resolve how to prove that poop is 72 hours old and carbon date it, then maybe we'll work on that ordinance sometime when we have nothing else. And Doug, I greatly appreciate your history lesson. Again, as always, that's very informative, and I appreciate the pictures as well. It's amazing that you were able to look up these people that lived here or that knew people that were here and the relatives. I think that's awesome that you do that. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates.
Don, I would say your last name, but I'd probably mutilate it. So when it comes to the alleys, we have a program where a community can have a special taxing district in order to get an alley in there, but you do need to get approval of the people that will be taxed. Currently, at least the last time we looked, which was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, in order to pave the alleys, we're looking at about $40 million in the city of Englewood. Currently, we have about $20 million of unfunded capital improvements that need to be done, such as bridges and stuff like that. It's one of those conversations that everybody wants a paved alley. I would love a paved alley, but frankly, at this point in time, unless we have a big influx of money, I don't know where we would find the funds to pave the alleys. So it's probably not what you wanted to hear. I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. I had a few comments as well. I wanted to thank Coween Dickerson for coming and speaking. I certainly share some of her concerns about selective enforcement, but I do have to disagree with the statement that most codes are bad for property rights. I do think that the general intent is to try to uphold some basic community standards. And while I do have some concerns with that, I don't think I have the same level of concern regarding the majority of our codes, if you will. We are a non-covenant community. I think we're proud of that, and a lot of people who live here, I think, value that. At the same time, though, I think there are some basic standards, trash in your yard, weeds of over 12 inches or something that should generally be enforced. And while I agree subjectively, I think we could probably go too far with that. Again, I think that the majority of those rules are in there for a reason. Mr. Cohn, thank you for your continuing stories. Always a pleasure to hear about the history of Englewood. Mr. Emison, thank you for coming down and speaking this evening. I do generally agree with Councilmember Barentine's assessment that perhaps we should gather some information. The council itself can make a decision about whether to meet with Mr. Emison. Candidly, my read of it, I've sat with Mr. Emison several times privately. I've chatted with him several times privately. I candidly think that he needs some help putting together a proposal for the city. It's a little bit difficult because I don't necessarily view that as my role in sort of helping this along, but I do think that we need to find the appropriate resource to be able to get a productive use out of that land on West Adriatic. And so I guess I'll suggest that we pick this issue up next week after we've been provided some additional information regarding Mr. Emison's situation to find out whether or not the council would like to get involved. To Mr. Krakowski, thank you for coming this evening. I'm really excited to hear about some new development possibilities at the Hilltop. I know a lot of folks in the community are really excited about that possibility. You asked about the alley paving, and I think we do have a pilot, program that was funded through this council for this year's budget. Mr. Keck, could you share some details perhaps about this pilot project?
Yeah, the concrete utility actually has budgeted, I believe, for this year $200,000 to look at an alley. That's essentially half the cost for an entire city block, standard block. And so by that, we would need to have a preponderance or majority of people, actually all of them, agreeing that they would pay their half if the city paid for half. And this may be an example of an area where that could work. But again, everybody else would have to agree to do that.
Mr. Krakowski, hopefully that may give you some possibility to try to organize the private property owners along your block to share some of the cost amongst the adjacent property owners, but also partner with the city in paying for half of the total. I know that can be a little bit difficult to get that 100% sort of buy-in on a cost like that, but hopefully that's something that could potentially be done. I know the council had talked about this pilot project for some time. I don't believe that any other block has sort of stepped forward to take advantage of this program. Mr. Keck is shaking his head no, so I believe that to be accurate, but perhaps that's a possibility. I will note that in my time working with Mr. Emison, that the paving district is no longer a model that is worked here, and the paving district is the model that we use to build out most of the road network here in the city of Englewood by cost sharing with the adjacent property owners to build out the street grid, if you will. But I know that structure itself is not available to be used, and so right now the only real possibility I see is this pilot program. But perhaps, Mr. Krakowski, if you could work with staff on that, work with some of your neighbors on that, and perhaps we could get some feedback at a later time on that. I apologize. Unfortunately, there's no opportunity for public comment at this time. I'm happy to chat with you a little bit offline, maybe after the meeting or in a private conversation. Anybody else with any public comments? Seeing none, I will move us on to agenda item 8. This is communications, proclamations, and appointments. Under A, we do have a proclamation declaring Doug Cohn as 2017 Citizen of the Year. I would entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. I think the council member Yates had that second there. Any comments? Would like to just comment, congratulations to Mr. Cohn. Really looking forward to our celebration with your friends and family. I don't believe we've nailed down that date quite yet, Mr. Keck. Is that correct?
It looks like we're going to shoot for the 22nd of May at this point in time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll get that nailed down and get invites out to get some public attending there. Councilmember Barentine?
Actually, you answered my question. Congratulations, Doug.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, please vote. Councilmember Russell, have you voted?
Did you vote?
No, I have not voted yet. I do have a question. Is that on the online packet, the proclamation?
Yes, it was provided, I believe.
We didn't get one in the hard copy packet.
Okay. It is available online on the electronic copy. Perhaps some feedback to staff that the hard copies that were delivered probably the week prior it was not included. Can others verify that in their hard copy? I don't have a hard copy. So.
I don't have a hard copy. No, in the hard copy it wasn't, and it's not a week prior. We get our pack at the same time it's put up on the website.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. Record shows 7 ayes.
At this time, I'd like to read the proclamation into the record. Whereas each year the City Council of the City of Englewood, Colorado honors a Citizen of the Year who has made significant contributions to the community of Englewood, and whereas Doug Cohn is a longtime Englewood resident who has devoted countless hours of volunteer service to the city of Englewood, and whereas Mr. Cohn has sacrificially dedicated his time to the city of Englewood through his service on several of Englewood's board and commissions over the years, including the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, the Englewood Library Board, Code Enforcement Advisory Committee, and the Election Committee. And whereas, if Mr. Cohn's years of volunteer service on Englewood's board and commissions were combined, they would total more than 2 decades of service to the community. And whereas, Mr. Cohn is a charter member of the Englewood Historic Preservation Society and uses his knowledge of Englewood's history to educate others about the city's rich history. And whereas, the Englewood City Council wishes to honor Doug Cohn for his many contributions to the city and community of Englewood. Now, therefore, we, the City Council of the City of Englewood, Colorado, hereby take great pride in proclaiming Doug Cohn 2017 Citizen of the Year. At this time, I would like to hold off the presentation of this proclamation for our event coming up. So, again, we'll look forward to that night of celebration with Mr. Cohn and his friends and family. Did you have something? Go ahead.
Since I wasn't able to review it ahead of time, there were a couple of corrections we might want to make in there. One, the City Council doesn't have a Citizen of the Year every year, only when we find people that are obviously worthy of that honor. So it hasn't been something that's just a mandate every year. So maybe if we could just take a look at it, and if there's a couple of corrections before we actually do it publicly, on whatever date we actually. I think
that would require a motion to reconsider at this point. At this point, this has been adopted.
Well, what a shame I didn't see a copy of it at the time I would have said that.
Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, let's move on to consent agenda items. I would entertain a motion on the consent agenda items at this time.
Mr. Mayor, we can approve consent agenda item 9A, 1 through 15. 9C, 1 and 2.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Comments? Councilmember Russell?
Oh. Did you say Russell?
Yes.
I would like to pull, hang on just a second, 9A15 and 9C2.
Thank you. Councilmember Barrington?
9A15? Mm-hmm. And 9C2?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, those 2 items have been pulled. Councilmember Barrington?
I'd like to pull 9A2.
Thank you.
And out of the consent agenda, that's the only thing, other than what she already did.
Okay. So right now I have 9A2, 9A15, 9C2 have all been pulled from the consent agenda. Any further comments? Seeing none, please vote on the remainder of the consent agenda items.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 7 ayes.
Okay, we're going to move on to 9A2 first. This is an IGA with Douglas County to obtain sex offender tracking software, SOTAR. The Police Department recommends that City Council adopt a bill for ordinance approving an intergovernmental agreement with Douglas County to obtain sex offender tracking software. Our staff source is Commander Team Englert. Good evening.
Good evening. During the process of all the work that was done on the sex offender ordinance, we received many requests for information from core requests and also information to be provided to council. During that process, we currently have a hanging file folder system, which is very outdated and cumbersome. During the course of that, my detective that works a great deal with sex offenders was in contact with Douglas County and found out that they have this proprietary software system called SOTAR, which they developed. Currently, if my count is correct, there's 81 metro law enforcement agencies that subscribe to this service. It is free of charge. They do not anticipate at any time charging for the use of this software. It would have reduced the staff time to present information greatly for us and add greatly to the efficiency of tracking sex offenders, and it would be a great investigative tool for our detectives.
Thank you. Questions? Councilmember Barrington?
I'm not sure how it's. I was a little confused on how it's a an investigative tool, because I would assume you guys already have access to investigative information. I can understand you saying the hanging folder compared to that information, but how is it used as an investigative tool that you don't have now?
I can give an example that was provided to us by Douglas County when we were researching moving to this. They had a case in which a small child at a school, and forgive me, but I don't know exactly what agency this was. The child alleged that a person tried to entice her into a vehicle and take her away. All she could say was it was a white truck. It was a white man with brown hair. The detectives can search through this search engine, putting in all the registered sex offenders in these 81 agencies, white truck, white male, brown hair, and it came up with 5 matches out of the sex offenders. Of those 5 matches, one of them was actually the person that tried to entice the child. And so that's why it would be a great investigative tool for our detectives.
And right now, how would you get that information?
Everybody is linked online that is a member of the SOTAR agreement, and so once you're a user in the system, our detectives can query the records of other agencies.
I understand how you're doing it with SOTAR because it's in here, but how do you do it currently right now?
Currently, we would not have that ability. We'd have to call other agencies or go to an agency that has SOTAR, such as Littleton or Sheridan.
That's not set up through like Judicial 18 or through Arapahoe County?
Arapahoe County subscribes to the Douglas County system.
And we don't have access through them?
We could go there, but it would slow down the process. You'd have to call them or find one of their detectives when we could just do it from our desktops.
Okay. And then I'm a little concerned that, is there any kind of use of this system that would eliminate, if we all of a sudden were going to get charged for the system, that we would now not have information that we currently gather? I guess I'm at a loss for the information you provided to find out exactly what we're doing currently so that I have some kind of comparison.
Well, currently, when a person comes to register or deregister with our department, we fill out paper forms. We fill out paper. We don't do paper cards. We do the fingerprints submitted to CBI. We have this folder. When they re-register, we check and verify the information. It's all in a paper hanging file folder, which is very antiquated. We don't even have, we have a spreadsheet of names, but we don't have the information digitalized in any sort of form that is modern and searchable just for our sex offenders, let alone access to all the other agencies.
Okay, so if all of a sudden Douglas County, since this is their proprietary information and you said that they're not charging for it currently, but you made it very clear under the financial implications here that at any time they wanted, with only 30 days notice, that they could go ahead and charge us. And so I'm concerned that once we moved over to the system and didn't have any other kind of backup or whatever we're doing currently, that we would be kind of at their mercy, that if they did decide to charge for it, that we would have already moved everything over and then would have to go ahead and do that. And so I'm just concerned.
We could always print our files and just pull out of their system if we decided that the cost was too exorbitant, that we couldn't afford to do it. Right now we have several other software systems that we use. We've just gone from CopLink to a Lumen system, which is the same sort of governmental sharing system. I'm not sure the cost for that, what it's going to end up being, could be between $5,000 and $7,000. In this day and age, these technological systems are just kind of getting to be the cost of doing business in our line of work.
But currently, right now, are they charging any of their partners yet?
They are not charging, and from what they've said, they do not anticipate charging. But they do have the escape clause. If they try to charge too much and we just want to print our files and back off and build our own Excel spreadsheets, we can do that.
All right, I appreciate you looking into this. I mean, it sounds, I'm not objecting to that, but I want to make sure that we're on top of the finances and stuff.
And you wonder
so
when
thank you
somebody
for answering
says
that.
it's free.
Thank you. Let's move on to Councilmember Russell.
I just have a question, and I don't know if this necessarily applies to this or not, but all of our sex offenders that live in Englewood, if they're not on the sex offender registry, they don't have to register in Englewood. Is that correct? It's only the people that are on the state sex offender registry that have to register in Englewood?
People who are adjudicated in court by a court somewhere, they're the ones that if they want to live here, they have to register. A court says that they have to register, and those are the ones that have to register. So I guess in a roundabout way, they would be on the state registry because that's maintained by CBI. We're just the local agency that maintains those files and does the re-registration for them.
Right, and that's an electronic registry also, correct?
We submit the information to CBI, but our in-house system is the hanging paper folders.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Yates.
Just the reason for doing this is so you can get a quicker and a more accurate and updated profile of the sex offenders. And that's what that brings to us, correct?
I wouldn't necessarily call it a profile because everybody's an individual. And I think this is just a way of managing the data in a more efficient manner, just like, doing a newer version of software, and we don't have a newer version of software. We have no software to do this. And we've estimated it will streamline the staff process as far as the registrations, just as an internal benefit to us.
And then with the more users on this, the better the information. That's why they're probably, that's why you'd want to participate, and that's why they have other jurisdictions involved.
I think the investigative tool is secondary to us at this point because those kind of stranger abductions are not all that common.
Okay.
But if we have something that we're faced with, we want to have every tool available to us. I by no means am casting any aspersions on any of the people that are currently registered in this city because I have no concern that any of them are going to victimize or re-offend. It came up as an administrative tool for us, and the investigative part of it is an added benefit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions at this time, I'd entertain a motion on 982.
Second.
Thank you. I think it's Councilmember Yates on the second there. Further comments on this? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 7 ayes.
Thank you.
Move on to 9A15. This is a memorandum of understanding between the state of Colorado and the city of Englewood. Staff recommends council adopt a bill for an ordinance approving this memorandum of understanding between the state of Colorado, Governor's Office of Information Technology, and the city of Englewood regarding upgrades to the public safety statewide digital trunked radio system software. Our staff source is Commander Team England. If you wanted to keep the presentation pretty brief, we know this is a consent agenda item.
Past life when I was in that division. We are a member of the state DTRS system, which is Digital Trunk Radio System, which we partner with other agencies in Arapahoe County to do our radio channels. We have common radio channels for large events, and these software upgrades are planned, and we have to sign this to be part of the system.
Thank you. Questions? Councilmember Russell?
One of the questions that I have, is this a budgeted item in the 2017 budget?
Yes.
Okay, it does not address that at all in the financial implications.
I'm sorry, there is no budgetary impact to us with accepting the software upgrades.
I think that's on the other one. There's another one in the packet about this also. This one says that the cost of these upgrades is $20,930 each for each of the upgrades.
I would have to defer to Commander Fender as far as if that is a budgeted amount. We do have a fund for radio expenditures, which that is probably in, but I could not answer whether that's budgeted or not. This is actually Commander Fender's.
Thank you. Is finance or city manager's office able to address that issue? We can come back to that, I suppose. Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
That was the same thing, is that in the analysis it says that these 5 software upgrades are to happen between September 2017 and completed in December 2017. Each one of the upgrades, each one of these 5 is supposed to be around $21,000. That's $105,000. And so I was surprised to see that $105,000 wasn't accounted for, that it said that it was already done, since it says that these 5 upgrades are going to be done between September and December of this year. So that's concerning. It's a lot of money.
Questions? Any further questions? Councilmember
I'm
Yates.
sorry, but I'm ill-prepared for that, and I'd have to research that.
Okay, I'd appreciate it.
When I was in that division, they did not charge for these upgrades.
And I learned I had to enunciate properly, because every time I said to somebody the trunk, they thought I was saying Trump. And they go, how did the president involve himself with our... I go, no, it's not that. Never mind.
You know, if you'd like to briefly table this, I could step outside and call Commander Fender and come back to it, and then I could give you an answer tonight instead of moving this on to another meeting, because I'm sure he'll answer his phone if I go out and call him.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates.
First of all, it states the cost in this series of 5 upgrades is $20,930. So it's not $20,000 each. It's the total of 5.
Excuse me?
It says 4 each. You have to
For each. Read the next 2 words.
I can confirm that for you.
It's $105,000.
All right, well, what happens if we don't do the upgrade?
If we don't do the upgrade, our radio consoles will not function correctly with the state DTRS system. And then we'd basically be an island unto ourselves with our radios.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gillett.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we table this till our next meeting. Put it on the consent agenda item next meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We can wait until a couple of weeks on this, Commander or City Manager.
I apologize for being up.
No.
No problem. This can wait, though, 2 weeks in your mind?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
City Manager, you agree? Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 7 ayes.
Thank you. Moving on to 9C2. Apologize, bear with me here just a moment. 9C2 is the Allen Plant alum residual removal and disposal. Staff recommends council approve by motion a contract with Secure On-Site Services USA, LLC, in the amount of $170,541 for residuals removal and disposal at the Allen Water Filtration Plant. Our staff source is Utilities Director Tom Brennan. Good evening, Director Brennan.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm here this evening to recommend approval by motion of the contract with Secure On-Site Services for removal of the current residuals on-site at the Allen plant. With this removal, all residuals on-site will be removed. Moving forward, all residuals, this gets us on track to move forward, all residuals produced in a given year will be moved prior to starting production the following spring. Do you have any questions at this time?
Questions from council. Councilmember Barentine.
On the front of this document, you gave us all of the previous council actions, and you have some years that were where you've got all the budgeted, and then what was paid out. And it seems, I'm just confused at how we ended up going from things that cost like $4,000, $47,000, and then we had 2 years where we didn't do anything, and then to remove it, like for 15, it's like, I don't know, 6-8 times as much with $400,000. Where's all the discrepancy in the and the cost, because then we didn't do it the following year, and then it's $215,000, and so it's kind of hard to gauge what's realistic. I mean, even in your own bids here, you've got 2 bids that were received, one for $170,000, a little more than that, and $54,000. Like, that's way. There's a lot of difference between those two, so I'm not getting why.
Okay. In March of 2012, State Health quit allowing us going to a municipal landfill. We had to go to a special site, so the cost roughly went from, the first year they went from $60 a yard to roughly $230 a yard. So that was in 2012. So since then, we only have one site to take it to. The price since then has fluctuated anywhere from about $180 a yard to $230 a yard. To your last, to address the last one, the bid, what was that for? For Norm Services for 54, he had a verbal from the state to take it back to Midway, which is a municipal landfill. The state would not honor it at this time. They're still processing the paperwork. If you recall, during one of Kathleen Bailey's presentations, Midway did a risk assessment. They submitted it in July of 16 and got a verbal approval of it. That approval still has not gone through. Norm Services was being optimistic, and that's why they pulled their bid. You'll see in the packet that they asked for a pull.
Yeah, that they didn't meet the criteria, but I wasn't sure whether that was on our part, what we were asking for. Or, okay, I appreciate that. I understand it better. That's fine.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell.
I would like to say thank you that the pile is going to be totally gone. I am very excited about that, and I appreciate that. Thank you. And so did we budget $250,000 again this year for what we're only going to end up paying $170,000?
Yes.
For?
Yes.
Okay. And will we probably do the same next year because you don't know exactly what the...
Yes, exactly. The reason the price, I was told by the landfill, the reason the price is fluctuating is right now they're with oil and gas slowing down, their volume isn't as great. They're looking for customers, so they're passing it on.
Okay.
And that's not a guarantee next year.
All right. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate this.
So does staff anticipate approval by the state of going back to municipal landfills in the near future?
I cannot comment
Difficult
on that.
to
It's difficult to say. I believe sometime in the future, yes, it will happen. There's a lot of communities now that are pushing back, and now that the landfills are getting interested, and the fact that Midway did their own risk assessment, if they get approval, Foothills will be right behind them because they're the exact same type of facility.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
Are we in any way tied to any kind of readings from the residuals in order for them to take it? Are we within certain parameters and they'll take it? Or do they test it before they take it? Or how are we handling that?
Currently, right now, there is no requirement because this facility is equipped to take everything right up to plutonium. So they don't, be honest with you, with our stuff, they don't care. At municipal landfills, yes, we do the test data. We submit it to the state. Then the landfill comes out and does their own sampling, and they submit that to the state. And that's how it's done for the municipal. For where it's going right now, Clean Harbors.
So they won't test it because they don't need to. They can take whatever.
Correct.
Going. Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion on 9C2.
Moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Further comments? Councilmember Russell.
I have a question, and this is not for Mr. Brennan. I noticed in the Englewood Water and Sewer Board minutes, which was in every one of those connector agreements, that there were no council members. There's 3 council liaisons on that board, and there were no council members there. Is there a requirement for at least one council member to be at the Water and Sewer Board meeting?
We're all at National League.
Not that I'm aware of. I understand their quorum
One
requirements.
of you wasn't.
Their quorum requirements to be the same as every other board and commission in the city is my understanding.
I noticed that too. We were all in.
Yeah, I know you were, and I know Linda was and Joe was. Was Councilmember Yates?
No.
Okay.
For some reason, I thought.
So your point is?
I wasn't the one that brought you up. Everybody was saying they were there. I was just asking a question.
Were you in attendance at these meetings? At the sewer meeting?
Was I at this meeting? I just answered that question. No, I was not at this meeting.
Oh, because I thought they had you on there.
The phone one, I think it says.
Yes, I was on a phone one.
Further questions?
Oh,
Comments?
I think what ended up happening was that you ended up being, maybe it was that you approved the minutes for the previous one where you were not in attendance then.
Thank you. I think we're getting a little off topic here. I think the question of 9C2 is in front of us here. Any further comments or
Well, that's the
questions?
backup for this.
Seeing none, please vote.
That would be important.
All votes have been cast. Record shows 7 ayes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 10. This is the public hearing items. There's no public hearings this evening, so I'll move us on to agenda item 11, ordinances, resolutions, and motions. 11A1, this is approval of ordinances on first reading. 11A1 is fire lane access easement at 2100 West Littleton Boulevard. This is Council Bill 25. Staff recommends council adopt a bill for an ordinance approving the city ditch fire lane access easement for 2100 West Littleton Boulevard. Our staff sources, Utilities Director, Mr. Tom Brennan.
Yes, thank you. Staff recommends council adopt a bill of ordinance approving the fire lane access easement for 2100 West Littleton Boulevard. The city ditch right-of-way runs along the west side of this property. This development was required to have fire access on all sides, so they are requesting to have access down our city ditch right-of-way. What they are going to be constructing is a concrete path, which will benefit us. We'll have an all-weather surface to get into this particular area. We have a clean-out facility that is to the south of there, and currently right now we cannot get into it in wet weather because our access was always blocked from Littleton. With this, we'll have future access from Littleton Boulevard, and this will not impact our ownership or anything else, any other maintenance activities for this.
Thank you. Questions for Director Brennan? Councilmember Russell?
If they are required to have access, fire access on all 4 sides, then why in the agreement does it say that if the city of Englewood at any time decides to remove their right-of-way to that access, they would find something else?
Yes, that's correct. We always leave that in. There is a path farther west that is owned by the city of Littleton. It's a cinder path that's not all weather. And right now, Littleton did not want that path concreted, is my understanding.
All right. So will it be used for anything other than fire lane access? Will it be used for access to the building by tenants?
No, it's only fire lane access.
Okay, because I was just wondering why we're only giving it to them for $10.
We do that with all our easements. Because the majority of our easements on City Ditch are Englewood City residents or the city of Littleton.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine?
I'm not sure that this is a project requirement because according to the Grove, this section wasn't part of their plan. So in section 4 here, it says that the guarantee shall construct the fire lane in accordance with the plans, but I tried to find it. They don't have plans. They didn't include this as part of this. It's my understanding that there's a little amphitheater that's going in on the other side that this may end up being used as more than just some kind of easement. I don't know that because their stuff. I can't find that this is part of that plan. The Grove is also still in a court action, and I'm still concerned about participating in this, along with what Councilmember Russell brought up. In the event that the fire lane, if this is actually going to end up being a part of their requirement for this project, and we're saying we could pull it at any time, I'm not sure how we would do that. I mean, I'm not able to see Section 4 where this is in the Grove's plan, this easement for this fire lane.
Right. And I do not have the full set of Grove plans myself.
If we're going to be doing that easement, and it is and it's our property, and we're saying that they have to maintain it in a certain way, and how they construct, what they construct on there, shouldn't we know what the plans are, since that's part of the contract that we're doing?
The plan they submitted to us just shows a concrete path, nothing else.
So the plan that they submitted to us was just this?
That is the easement. That's the legal description.
Okay. Because I was told that section wasn't part of their plan. So I'm confused in exactly what. Also, when it says the city director of utilities, are we talking about Littleton city director of utilities or ours?
You'll have to read more. I'm not.
The section, again, Section 4, it's in a couple of different places, but again in Section 4, I believe, is the first place where it lists it. It says the guarantee shall construct the fire lane in accordance with the plans that I was just asking about, and specifications approved by the city director of utilities.
Yes, that's the concrete path.
Okay. My question is, who's city director of utilities, Littleton or ours?
Me, Englewood.
Okay. Do you have the plans for the Grove where this would go in?
We have the plans for the path, yes.
Did you get them from the contractor or from the city?
From the developer. That's who we're doing this agreement with, is the developer.
Like I said, I was unable to find them there, and that concerns me that this was considered part of that project. So,
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion at this time.
Moved.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. Let the record show 5 ayes and 2 nays, the 2 nays being Councilmember Russell and Barentine.
Thank you. Moving on.
Thank you.
11A2, this is amendments to Municipal Code, City of Englewood, Title 12, Chapter 2. Staff recommends council adopt a bill for an ordinance amending Title 12, Chapter 2, Sections 1 through 5 of the Englewood Municipal Code 2000, entitled Wastewater Utility. Our staff source is Industrial Pretreatment Administrator Jonathan Bridges. Good evening.
Good evening. Staff recommends council adopt an ordinance to approve revisions to Title 12, Chapter 2, the Wastewater Utility Ordinance. The Littleton Englewood Wastewater Treatment Plant Industrial Pretreatment Division has drafted proposed revisions to the industrial pretreatment portions of the City of Englewood Municipal Code and the City of Littleton Municipal Code. The revisions fall into the following 4 categories. Revisions required by EPA as a result of the 2014 audit of the pretreatment program. Revisions recommended by EPA per industrial streamlining regulations. Revisions recommended by the Littleton Englewood Wastewater Treatment Plant Industrial Pretreatment Division. And revisions recommended by Littleton Englewood Wastewater Pretreatment to implement or revise select fees for inspections, re-inspections, and septic receiving station rates. These revisions have been reviewed by city attorneys, both cities of Englewood and Littleton, by EPA, found acceptable by EPA Region 8, and have been reviewed by, I apologize, the plant's attorney as well, Hill and Robbins. The revisions required by EPA, the major one was addressed by the municipal code addendums that was presented earlier to implement delegation of the pretreatment program within the the sanitation districts that connect to the wastewater plant. A couple others deal with including full language from 40 CFR 403 into our municipal codes. They can be entered into the wastewater permits. That's an example of that is the bypass regulations, where we don't have the full language in there. It's a provision. If there is a bypass, it provides the terms and requirements for the facility, what they have to report. Revisions recommended by EPA for the streamlining rule include some provisions to implement regulations that would reduce reporting requirements for select facilities, reduce sampling requirements perhaps. It's under for certain categorical facilities, if they can prove that they don't have the contaminant that's being required to be sampled, if they can prove that that's not been found in their waste stream, then they can take that off of their sampling requirements. So that would reduce reporting and sampling requirements to them and potentially to us, which would reduce costs of the program. Revisions recommended by the pretreatment division include adopting a wastewater control permit. Currently we have a significant industrial user permit, which includes categorical industrial users that EPA requires us to permit based on their activities. We'd like to introduce a wastewater control permit, which is a step down from the significant industrial user and would allow us to have a little bit lesser requirements than the significant industrial user permit requires, which would allow less staff time, less resources to be expended, and also be an easier permit for some of the industrial users to comply with. That would also allow us, with the change we're recommending, would allow us to surcharge for high-strength pollutants facilities that fell into both the wastewater control permit category and the significant industrial user category. Currently, we're only allowed to surcharge significant industrial users, for example, service uniform and medical dairies for their excess BOD, COD, and TSS strengths. This would fall into, if nutrient regulations come into play, or when they come into play, this would allow us to potentially surcharge for excess phosphorus that's coming from facilities. So it would be a way to recoup some of those costs, as opposed to having the plant pay for all the cost of treating that. The last category is revisions that are included for cost recovery. The first is the trucked and hauled septage program. We currently charge 6 cents per gallon for, I believe it's 9 companies are permitted to discharge at our facility. That cost has been in place at 6 cents per gallon since 1997. Costs to treat have increased over time. We'd like to raise that fee to 9 cents per gallon to bring it more in line with what the actual costs of treatment are. There are several other facilities along the Front Range that provide this service. Their costs range from 8 cents a gallon up to 11.5 cents a gallon. So the 9 cents puts us closer to paying our costs, plus it keeps us in the range of what comparable costs are. The second item is an introduction of a $100 reinspection fee that would be required for certain facilities due to failure of the businesses to correct non-compliant items that were identified during inspections. This would apply specifically to sector control programs, such as restaurant inspections and automotive car washing facilities, that sort of thing. What we found is that we don't have a good mechanism at this point to incentivize the facilities to come into compliance if they have multiple inspections that have failed, and we have requirements for them to put in a piece of plumbing or pump their interceptor. This would give us a mechanism to, after on the third inspection, to recover a $100 reinspection fee. The next introduction of a fee is a $50 charge to sanitation districts to recover costs for inspections conducted by the pre-treatment division in districts due to the district's inaction or refusal to inspect their facilities. This also is with the connector addendums that were put into place earlier this evening. Select sanitation districts perform their own inspections on the FOG and POGS program. That's the restaurants and automotive. If they don't have staff to conduct those inspections, or if they fail to do the inspections as they're required to, the pretreatment division can step in and do those inspections and bill them back $50 for each inspection based on this proposed fee. The fourth item is addition of an industrial surcharge cost recovery program to allow the city to surcharge industrial users not otherwise defined as significant industrial users for the cost of handling and treating pollutant concentrations in excess of normal domestic strength. And that's what I was talking about earlier with the regard to the, it would give us the new category wastewater control permit, which would allow surcharging of that in addition to the significant industrial users. These amendments to the municipal code don't have any cost implications in terms of excess labor that will come into play, but will provide an opportunity for the wastewater plant to recover some costs and offset some of the staff's expenses.
Thank you. Questions? Councilmember Olson?
Thank you. This is a great summary. Actually, the summary is very detailed for a summary, so it was good. And when I realized this is a template that we give to everybody, or that the city uses free to report to us. So when it did come to analysis, I had on my iPad a question mark. So should that just read for the public when they see these? Should it just read "see above"? And then secondly was the financial implications. There are some financial implications here, but there's no change in the budget, right? So maybe we just need to say that here, so that those aren't left blank for people to wonder what the heck, did someone forget to write something there, or just for clarity for the public.
I apologize.
That's fine. But if you have something to add there that we don't know, is my assessment right? Is that the analysis really is what's above, and that the financial implications are recovery of costs primarily?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates?
How often do you guys review the cost of actually sending a person out to do a inspection or a reinspection? Simply because those are really good rates that you're offering. And by the time you figure the fuel and the vehicle and the labor and all the insurances and everything goes along with it, my biggest concern is $50 is not going to cover it. And $100 for a reinspection fee is not going to cover it. And for the public's information, we talked about this at the water board, I think it was the water board meeting, or somewhere we talked about it, I don't remember. On reinspections, it's not the first time that they have to do a reinspect. It would be the second time that they have to do a reinspect. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so that rate is very reasonable. So are we pretty confident that those are the right rates?
We believe so. We have the average labor rates for an inspector, including benefits, are between $40 and $50 an hour. With the inspections, if we were to conduct them in the sanitation districts, we would group inspections. So we would do multiple inspections at a time on a trip. So we would theoretically be able to do an inspection, say, in half an hour, move to another facility that's in the vicinity, do an inspection in half an hour, that sort of thing. The reason that the reinspection for the $100 fee, the reason that's $100 is because that would be an individual inspection where we go out just for that particular inspection to reinspect it. So we don't get the economy of scale with multiple inspections. And plus, it's over the $50 because it's meant to incentivize the facility to come into compliance as well.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gillett.
Thank you again for this report. I just had a couple questions. The Truckton hauls septic, or septage, how much are we hauling now? Do you have an idea?
You have numbers?
I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it's about, I want to say around 2 million gallons per year, what we receive.
Our income this last year was approximately, I would say 230,000.
Correct, and obviously increasing it this much would bring it up to about $370,000 to $380,000 to help offset the cost.
And the reason I asked that question, I thought it was a couple million. That's why I wanted to confirm that. And that's quite a cost increase. That's a 50% increase. Have we talked to them? 50% increase is a big increase. And do we not want to step it up in time, or we just want to hit them with this 50% increase right up front?
This is more consistent with what they're being charged at other locations. Metro Wastewater charges 10 cents a gallon, which is the nearest facility to us. So it's a good price compared to that. We provide this as a service to. It's not meant to be not necessarily meant to be a cost center. It's meant to recover costs to provide a service for illegal dumping of those wastes, so they don't go out and put them in a manhole someplace. We want to provide access and ability to discharge those properly. So that's the intention. So we don't believe that that's going to change who comes to the facility to discharge. If it does reduce in the volume discharged, it just is going to offset the cost that we'd have to pay for the treatment of that. So if the revenue decreases, the cost also decreases of maintaining the program. Not yet. No, we will mail some letters out to the to the dumpers, so they have notice of this fee changing, and then we'll have an opportunity to look elsewhere if they'd like to for service.
It only sounds like 3 cents until you realize
It adds up. It's surprising, isn't it?
The second question I had, and I thank you for answering. We have various sanitation districts. I know where I live, I'm in a unique sanitation district that I don't know who they are, but I just keep paying them every quarter. But you said that you have to charge $50 because of their inaction. So are we charging just the ones that don't act, or are we charging it across the board?
No, the intention, the way the addendums have been written, we have large districts like Southgate Sanitation, South Arapahoe Sanitation. They conduct their own inspections of these facilities. That is the way they have been operating for the past several years since the connector agreements were put in place in the late 80s. What the connector addendums do is formalize what is happening in the districts currently. South Englewood does not perform their own inspections currently, so their connector addendum says that the wastewater plant will perform those inspections. Valley Sanitation does not perform their own inspections currently. We perform those inspections, so that'll remain the way it is. If the districts that currently conduct their own inspections fail to do their inspections, then we will charge that fee, and that's actually written into the connector addendums as well. This $50 formalizes the fee that's been presented in the addendums.
It's just a reason to bring that up. I tried to get a hold of my sanitation district and can't.
Who's sanitation? What is it?
By Bellevue Park. That's all I'll say. I don't want to say them over there.
We'll talk offline, and I can give you a contact at the district.
And we'll answer the phone?
Very possibly. We have emergency contacts at each district. And
I just wanted to talk to them, ask them why they're the biggest part of my bill. So that's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
In the information that you provided at study session, I thought there was some cost to implementing the pretreatment program that you had on there.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
I thought that there was some additional cost that was to implement the pretreatment program that you had discussed at the study session.
I don't believe so. We had the costs that we presented were the recovery of cost section, and then you had questioned the
costs. So there was no other change to that? Okay. And then I had asked at the study session if we could have a little bit more information on if you had kind of examined what your actual costs were, but it sounds like you're more going on what the market rate is.
Well, actually, in terms of I believe at the study session you asked about the inspection cost, but also implied that you were wondering about all the costs that were being presented.
I think the phrase was to recoup your costs. And
correct,
so, yeah.
correct. And I may have misspoken on some of that. Do you want to discuss the costs?
Okay, as far as the septic receiving station costs, the city of Littleton had the same question, and our environmental health and safety manager attended, and he gave a pretty good breakdown. I'll see if I can remember exactly what he said, but the treatment costs that we're proposing, if we take all of our sampling data of the septic program, their wastes are approximately 36 times the normal strength.
Mm-hmm.
So we took the unit rate for treatment for the citizens, and we multiplied that by 36, and that came out to about 7 cents. On top of those, that cost, we have to administer the program. We do the sampling, we have cameras, and those are only O&M costs, not equipment. You may, if we need to replace equipment. Mm-hmm. We felt that 9 cents was fair.
I wanted to make sure that we had it on our record as well. I did listen to that Littleton meeting. There were 2 issues that got brought up. I asked whether it was going to be presented to our partners, and obviously it was. I greatly appreciate that. That makes it easier in working with them, and I did listen to that meeting, and you did it justice to explain it as well. Thank you very much. I appreciate what you guys did. I would have more questions, but quite honestly, you're doing that presentation as well, answered a lot of them, so thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Councilmember Olson with a second that time. Further comments? Councilmember Yates?
Oh, I hit the wrong button.
Oh, no problem. Councilmember Russell?
I would just like to thank you for making the corrections. I went in and checked to make sure that you did it. Thank you.
We appreciate you pointing them out. They should not have been in there. I apologize.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Littleton has Peggy Cohn, and we have Rita Russell. So.
Other comments? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. The record shows 7 ayes.
Okay, moving on to, thank you. Moving on to 11C1. This is the Englewood McClellan Reservoir Foundation broker listing agreement. The EMERF board recommends that City Council approve a resolution of support of a listing agreement with NavPoint Real Estate Group to market the remaining available parcels on behalf of EMERF. Our Staff Sources Utilities Director, Tom Brennan. Good evening, Director Brennan. Welcome back.
Good evening. I'm before you this evening representing the Englewood McClellan Reservoir Foundation Board, recommending approval of a resolution of support for the listing agreement with NavPoint Real Estate Group to market the remaining available parcels on the behalf of Englewood McClellan Foundation. Since this is the 3rd time I'm presenting in front of you, I believe I've submitted everything, all your requests. So at this time, I'd like to entertain some questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Councilmember Russell?
I believe I was under the understanding that we had consensus at the last study session
to pursue leases in perpetuity rather than lease with option to buy. And so I would like to bring that forward. There is a clause at the end of the contract that says these premises are available for sale with council approval after the first 20-year lease term, and I would like that removed because I would like it to go back the way the citizens had an initiative. They voted on what they thought would be one parcel of property, and I would rather lease these properties in perpetuity.
Thank you. Just to respond to that, I do believe that we did have some council consensus to give direction to NavPoint that we have a strong preference for leases. What I heard at our study session is that we were willing to entertain sale offers. Perhaps Councilmember Russell, you could potentially, amend. I would suggest perhaps there could be some language that could suggest council's strong preference for long-term leases. I think that given our conversation, I'm not sure that we have a majority who would like to remove entertaining a sale, but that's a discussion that we could have perhaps with your motion if you would like. And maybe we could loop back around to that here in just a moment.
Okay, I would like to move that we strike that phrase, these premises are available for sale with council approval after the first 20-year lease term. It is on
Sorry,
page,
what page are you on?
Page 8 of 9.
What about the electronic?
Excuse me, 461.
Thank you. Give me just a moment here.
Actually, 462.
462, thank you. Give me just one moment and I'll get to the appropriate spot.
I guess that is one.
It's the page just before the signature page.
Thank you. So 462 is the term sheet, is the fee schedule sheet.
Actually, I think it's actually 61. My counters weren't changing.
No problem, thank you. No, it's not 61 either. Does anybody have an electronic? Yes.
It's on the listing agreement.
Okay, but that's not actually in the action itself. That's in the study session memorandum.
No, it is in the listing agreement.
Okay, yes. Thank you. What page of the listing agreement?
It is page 8 of 9. I don't know what it is on the electronic copy. It's the page before the signature page on the exclusive right to lease listing contract.
Thank you. Bear with us just one moment. Hopefully we can find this. Amendments to bylaws.
Page 470.
470.
It's under which item?
7? It's just before 26.
Oh gosh, I might be wrong then.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not 470 as well.
Here.
Thank you. Well, I apologize. I'm having some trouble finding it. However, if you could read that motion one more time for the record, I apologize. I'm having some troubles here. Okay. Thank you. So this does appear to be page 8 of 9 of the listing agreement under item 25, additional provisions. It is the 6th paragraph, the last paragraph under 25. The sentence says, the premise are available for sale with council approval after the first 20-year lease term. The motion is to strike that line. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion on this amendment alone at this time. Councilmember Barentine? Any comments on that amendment?
I had the same concern. I thought we made it very clear that it was written as if it was one parcel. I think nothing stops that property from being sold in 20 years if the citizens vote to sell it.
Thank you. Councilmember Gates?
Question, you're saying strike it completely or?
Just that sentence.
Just that sentence. I would be in favor of making it clear that leases are, are the preference. Because I really think we do need to retain ownership of property as much as possible. But there may be a situation where the lot itself may not necessarily be something that is really worth keeping our hands on. You know, I would ask, you know, if you would want to change it to reflect a lease's preference, is a preference over sale, if that's something you would entertain.
Actually, I would not like to entertain that, and the reason is also the resolution itself is written in such a way, when you go into the resolution, it says, whereas Ordinance 41 series of 1999 established the creation of the Englewood McClelland Reservoir Foundation to oversee the development of property to enhance and diversify the city's long-term revenues. If we sell the property, there will be no long-term revenues. And I would like to honor what the purpose was in purchasing this land. We've already got one lease with option to buy. And I think it should go back to a vote of the people if the land needs to be sold.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates, any further comments?
No, sir.
Thank you. I will generally second Councilmember Yates. I would prefer that amendment. My preference would be that sentence to, end with, although there is a strong preference from the Englewood City Council for long-term leases. Councilmember Olson?
So tell me exactly what it would read then. I was never in agreement with selling.
Right now, the motion is simply to remove that sentence. It is a motion and a second. I think Councilmember Yates and I are advocating for a slightly different language. That might
say the whole thing. Say the whole thing.
That is not the motion that is being considered.
Oh, okay.
What I am advocating for is the premises are available for sale with council approval after the first 20-year lease term, although the Englewood City Council has a strong preference for long-term leases. Is the language... That's not the motion on the table, and I wanted to make that very clear, but that is what I will be advocating for this evening.
But the motion on the table...
The motion is on the table is to simply remove that sentence, and right now we are in discussion of that motion. So Councilmember Olson, comments on that?
We'll just vote.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gillett?
I'll support the motion. I don't want the property sold.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine?
Oh, no, you answered my question.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure which one we were doing. I apologize.
No problem. I'll vote against this, not because, I want to see, again, I made it very clear that I think my position is for long-term leases. However, if there's a deal so good that the future council can't pass up, I generally trust their judgment to be able to make that call. At this time, there are no further comments. I would enter Councilmember Olson.
So if we vote to strike this, the amendment that's been suggested, it does not disallow the staff to come forward and say, hey, we have somebody who really won't do this unless there's a sale, right? It doesn't keep us from doing that, does it?
We will not market it as for sale. What the board was going on is
right. Okay, so what I'm
request 1713 this year, where it said it was all the parcels. That's why we kept it in there. That March 22nd, 2017 memo that's in your packet. That is the reason we kept it in. I understood that your preference was, but our understanding was that that ordinance passed by the voters in 15 allowed for sale, and it listed all the parcels that are in this. Okay. But I
have to go with what the citizens voted for.
Thank you. And again, just for everybody following, this is page 531 of 539 in the packet that we are discussing here.
And that's the paragraph you're talking about, 531?
I'm sorry? 531, it is the last sentence under 25, just before 26. The premises are available for sale with council approval after the first 20-year lease term. The motion is to remove that sentence.
So if I can speak.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I think what I'm struggling with is that I do think that some people voted not understanding that full thing. But if what you had written in here is correct, that is exactly the way it was worded, then people voted yes for it. That's what you're suggesting in this document.
No, we're referring to a memo from Dugan Coomer on March 22nd, 2017, Council Request 17-013, sale of properties surrounding McClelland Reservoir. That's the reason we kept it in.
Stating an opinion that we have the legal authority to sell this land without another vote of the people. Right. And I think that, Councilmember Russell and Councilmember Barentine, without speaking for them, I think are saying that, this should go to a vote of the people every time. Is that helpful? Anything else, Councilmember Olson? Move on to Councilmember Barentine.
I think what we brought last time was the actual ballot language that said a utility property and then referenced people to go off that ballot and read other issues to find out, a Council Bill 28, to find out. They had to read additional information aside from that ballot issue to find out that it included all of the properties. As it was worded on the ballot, it said a utility property, and was not clear enough for the citizens to understand that they were selling off all of it and that they were giving council the authority rather than the voter to go ahead and make a decision on each parcel as it got sold. And that's where they felt that they got duped, because that's not what the ballot issue said. So in considering that, that it should have been made much, that it appeared as if it were made unclear for a purpose to give authority to the council and take it away from the citizens. So with that concern from them, it would be, that's why I would like to have this stricken, so that it doesn't stop anybody from selling it later, or from the citizens from making that decision, or from council bringing it to the public in the future. And we have to 20-year lease it regardless of which way you interpret this that vote. It has to go to a lease anyway. So,
thank you, Councilmember Russell.
And I just want to make certain that it doesn't go with a 20-year lease with option to buy, because that puts the option in the buyer's hand, not in the city's hand. And that's why I want to strike that phrase altogether. And I don't think that precludes, if somebody comes to the Englewood McClellan Reservoir Foundation and offers us so much that we couldn't turn it down, I think if you came to council, you probably would get the approval to sell that. But these are our last 5 properties.
Yes. Councilmember Yates.
I would like to ask a question of our new city attorney, baptism by fire. And I realize this is your first day with us, so if you need a few minutes to review that, we might take a bio break or something like that and give Allison a chance to at least read what happened. But my question would be, what the community voted on. It is, we have the opportunity, we have the authority to sell a property. If we were to change this agreement so it is only for lease applications, do we violate the will of the people or the vote? There you go.
With that, if not, I'm happy to.
Would you like a few minutes?
There's no way I can read this entire contract.
Okay, fair enough.
I think the answer, though, is that the contract is not binding upon the vote of the people. That's a separate sort of question in my mind of whether or not that vote granted this body the legal authority to sell that property. This contract would not bind that vote of the people, in my opinion.
Anita did the vote. In my opinion, I think that even what they voted on, if you take it in its entirety with Council Bill number 28, it gives council the authority to sell it. It doesn't require council to sell it.
I think that's fair.
Or to offer it.
I disagree with that piece even, but even if you take it the way it's written, it doesn't require you to sell it. It just says you can.
Councilmember Yates, further question?
Or the responsibility of offering it for sale.
I don't know that there was a duty written into what the voters passed, is what I would say to that.
Okay. All right.
Other comments?
I think Mayor Pro Tem was next.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gillett.
Mr. Mayor, for my clarity and my thinking on this is that this is a contract for an agreement of services between the City of Englewood and NavPoint.
Correct.
What we're not voting on whether or not to sell them, to do anything. We can make that decision once they have an offer to us.
Simply the contract.
This is just
Yes, that is correct, but
it's a contract for their work for us, not for any sale of any property. While I would like to go ahead and support taking that sentence out, it doesn't bind us either way because it's not a contract for sale, it's a contract to work with a contractor.
correct. But, for clarity, at the study session, NavPoint said they would market it as for sale at the end of 20. So that's the concern. But the board does not have any problem with taking out the wholesale option. It's, like I said, we're just going by this memo. So
I'm going to continue my support of the amendment and just remove that, and we can add it in later if they want to offer us $100 million to sell it. I'm in.
Councilmember Olson.
I think I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates.
One quick question. During our study session, I got the understanding that they just wanted clear direction from council, lease or sale or whatever. And whatever we choose is what they will do.
correct.
Okay. With that in mind, I will support Councilmember Rita Russell's motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
I think what I was thinking about was whether our city attorney would like to weigh in at some point and just would like more time, and if our city manager, having watched this for the last several weeks, would prefer that we hold off on this till we get all the information, or whether you think that it's pretty straightforward.
The impact of removing that one line is merely to take the decision out of this contract and leave it out there as a possibility. So by removing it, basically, you're putting everyone on notice that the decision will be made at some point.
We'll also probably give direction to our broker that they probably don't want to market it as that.
I can
Is that a fair
handle that.
statement, do you think?
I think we're all for the amendment.
I think, yes, I think we've made some comments. Now the amendment is on the table, a first and a second, to remove the sentence, the premises are available for sale with council approval after the first 20-year lease term. Council will vote.
All votes have been cast. Let the record show 6 ayes and 1 nay being Mayor Jefferson.
Thank you. We'll move on to the underlying motion as amended now for approval of the contract with NavPoint. I'd entertain comments on that.
Yeah, we need to have a motion for
I think we had an underlying motion already. Yes.
Did we?
I believe so. No? Okay. Then let's do let's do a motion to approve as amended.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Comments at this time on as amended minus that sentence. I will generally be supportive. I appreciate NavPoint coming and working with us on a reduction of the brokerage fee where we already have LOIs. I appreciated that, and I appreciated their willingness to be aggressive in their pricing and offering us pretty good fee terms. So I will be supporting this and looking forward to a good long-term relationship with NavPoint Real Estate. Any further comments? Mayor Pro Tem Gillett.
I want to say the same thing, and thank you, Tom, for all your work and everybody that's involved in this process to get us to here. I appreciate that they did relook at their commission structure, and they gave us what I believe is a fair commission on that. So I'm excited to move forward with them and hopefully have great results. Thank you.
Further comments? Seeing none, please vote.
All votes have been cast. Record shows 7 ayes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move on to agenda item 12. This is general discussion. Under Mayor's Choice, we do have city manager compensation. At this point, I would entertain a motion on that.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Councilmember Barentine.
I am concerned about the timing that council did this. I expressed that. We really need to make sure that these decisions are made as part of our budget process, and council took full responsibility for this not being part of the October budget process. So we need to make sure that, I think two things were asked for. One was the transformation point summary that had happened from October as presentation to staff that we had requested, and then, of course, whether this was already included in the budget. And I want to say that from that presentation, that I have a huge amount of respect for our city manager, what he did, his evaluation, his assessment, his concerns about some of the issues that needed to be taken care of. And more than that, I had even more respect for him that he came to the table with this council, and what he asked for was not money. What he asked for was direction. What he asked for was leadership. What he asked for was guidance. And what it seems we're prepared to do is exactly the opposite of what he asked for, and that's just throw money at it and not give him what he asked for. And I will not disrespect what you asked for. You brought up concerns about the budget, about the timing of this, and that what you really wanted was the leadership and some additional direction. My concerns to make sure that we have the transformation point summary brought forward so that we can see some of the work that you're probably already doing on addressing a lot of the issues that you already brought up with your leadership. And I'm disappointed in this council that they did exactly the opposite of what I believe that you asked for. I would rather schedule some additional meetings to provide you that, give some goals, set some parameters so that we can do what you asked for and have something where you have a benchmark, and then we can come to an understanding of where we want to be, and that is part of that reward going into that. Hopefully we will do that. As a result of not getting the information on the budget and some of the things that I've already mentioned, it is not through your performance or through that evaluation that I make the decision that I cannot vote for this. And I hope that you understand the deep and sincere respect I have for the way you presented yourself, how you have handled things, and the concerns that have come forward, and that you would like to have some time, leadership, and guidance in dealing with that. And that being said, I'm sure that you'll understand how professional I think that you handled all of this, and where I was, as I stated in that meeting, that I've been put in a position where I cannot vote for this. We should have done it with the budget process. I'm not going to repeat all of that, and I hope you understand that has nothing to do, from my heart, has nothing to do with that. And I have a huge amount of respect for you, and I would like for you to get exactly what you asked for from this council.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
Eric, I really appreciate the work. Manager Kick, appreciate the work that you've done this last year, and actually beyond that, because we didn't do this in a timely manner. I think we all agreed with that. I wanted to ask you, do you feel as though we did not give you what you needed that night, that the meeting was unproductive or not helpful to you in knowing what your direction is at this point and what we'd like to see happen?
No, I felt that it was a good start. As I enunciated that evening, I really appreciated the fact that we were actually talking strategically, and I think that's a good start. I think that there's much more that needs to be done. I still would like to follow up, as Council Member Barentine has mentioned, to have some follow-up conversation. I think that's critical, not only to myself, but my ability to interact and relate to my other directors, as well as our new city attorney now, in helping us to chart where we're going as an organization for the future.
And so I appreciate that. I do think it was a good meeting, too, and a good start, and there's always a lot more that can be done. So I'm going to vote yes for this, because I think the work that you've done is shown way beyond the leadership of even ourselves. But in going forward, what could we do to set you up so that you get what you need in a timely and sort of a regular way, so that we're always operating in the way that you would like to be managed in terms of setting goals, keeping measurements of that, being able to, be excited when we've reached them, you've reached them, and then say, hey, what can we do if you can't reach them? What else might we do to help you or the city?
Councilor, I appreciate that question. That's an excellent one. Unfortunately, as we're all acutely aware, we're always dealing with the tyranny of the urgent.
I read that book.
Yes. We have a number of items that come forward that I think prevent us sometimes as an organization from looking strategically. That's our failure, is that we're, as an organization, we're very reactive, and that puts staff, it puts me in a very reactive position. If we had some goals, per se, that indicate that these are the things we're going to work on, and we create a parking lot for all of their ideas when people come forward, that we can push those things to. It's not to disrespect them. But right now, as an organization, and I'm not saying this with any disrespect to the council, because you're dealing with what you need to deal with as what we bring to you. But I feel like staff is out ahead, and me particularly as the leader of the organization, is out ahead of the city council in some instances. And that puts us in a very deleterious position. And I don't like to be there. I'd like to know that council is on board what we're trying to do. I've attempted to be very diligent along with their staff by putting together programs, and specifically the Englewood 5, which we just presented to the city council about 4 weeks ago now. It indicates the areas that we are focusing on. However, there are others that need just as much attention from a strategic standpoint, from a goal perspective, that we would like to be held accountable for, in addition to all the other things that come up on a weekly basis with City Council. But I think that would be helpful, but we need to carve out time, not just with me, but again, with those who are trusted with management and leadership of the city to address those matters and address them in a fashion that is amenable to both the City Council, the community, and staff.
So we've done a lot of goal setting together. We have a lot of goals on paper at this point. We've got comprehensive plan types of goals. We've got city council goals. You've got your strategic plans in those different areas. What do you, I guess what I'd like, and you can't maybe answer this tonight, is how would you like us to go about that? I do think having regular meetings, setting aside time would be one thing, but I think we have so many goals floating around there that I'm not sure where we're headed most of the time either, so it doesn't surprise me for you that has to work day in, day out in this, how confusing it could be. But I need from you, and I don't know what the others might think about this, I need for you to tell us or me, where do you need it? How can we structure this in an outlined way or something with some implementation goals, 1 year, 2 years, 3 year kind of thing? I just don't want to add more goal layers.
Sure, and I think one of the things that we're really trying to do is gain alignment. And Councilor Barentine's spot on. I think these things need to be woven into our budget process.
Mm-hmm. When the priority.
Yeah, they need to be priorities. Obviously, we have the 8 priority areas, but as you've tried to see, we have really worked diligently to put together elements that are in alignment with good governance. And I will tell you, as the council's very aware, we have zeroed in like a heat-seeking missile upon many of the things that the council has enunciated through its goal setting that you all work together to produce, and have already completed them. However, that being said, there's still other things that we're not scratching the surface or touching quite yet, and I think we need to build those into our work plan and process. So it's not just me working on that, because in and of itself, I cannot produce or make these goals happen.
Sure.
It's the staff people who get behind that and are in alignment with that and are working through change management that we're trying to produce to create a better and a higher performing organization.
I guess I'm asking for a structure for it that we can be helpful to you with.
And I don't have an answer for you this evening.
And I'm not expecting one tonight. I think I'm asking it more rhetorically. Let's think about what that is, because going forward, I wouldn't want it to, for one thing, to go as long as this did. We didn't do this in a timely manner. And secondly, not to have come up with a structure that helps all of us stay on track with so many goals that I think we've created.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell.
I actually would concur with Councilmember Barentine, and I appreciate your openness, and I respect you a great deal. And I think, from my perspective, I do believe it was a good first start. And I think things have changed in the last couple of months. I think perhaps there's been a change in council and how we interact with each other. I believe that also is significant for you. It doesn't mean we always have to agree, but the way we interact. And I think this is all part of the process. I personally believe if you would give council a summary of the transformation point, it might give council some idea of what you're facing. And I think it probably would be very eye-opening to many of us. And I want council to be there for you and to help you. And my number one issue since I've been on council is to get the budget straightened out. And I'm very encouraged that there is more money in the budget now. But I want to be careful because the minute there's money, we want to spend it. And we need to be preparing for the fiscal cliff wherever it's at. And so all of that is just said to say, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate that you need help. And I will be voting no, too, mainly because of the way the process was set up. And I think council ourselves needs to get on board with process and moving forward with the process. I think that would, with every process, I think that would help things, too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I also had a couple of comments. I appreciate what Manager Keck has done for us in his more than 2-year tenure here, and I think that particularly in the areas of cost control and expenses, I think he's done an outstanding job. I do believe that an additional bonus is warranted at this time. Although this is slightly higher than I would have preferred, I will be supporting it, knowing that this is in lieu of an annual percentage increase that would compound on an annual basis. So I appreciate that Manager Keck suggested, one time rather than a percentage annual increase that would have that compounding effect of cost. And also noting that this has been substantially more than 1 year since we did his review. I wanted to say that his review was due in about September. So really this was about 1.5 years, and so that gives me some comfort that even though this number is slightly higher than I would appreciate, it is, I think, well warranted, and I will support it. However, I do agree with Councilmember Olson that we have many sort of clear direction and goals on tap, and perhaps it's consolidating some of that, but I agree with Councilmember Olson that if you feel like there's lack of clear direction, then we need a process in order to clear that up. I think sometimes in the political process it's difficult to get unanimous consent, but I think that for every issue that we brought up, we have gained consensus on direction one way or another. So that's the only thing I would slightly disagree with, but again, I will be supporting this. Councilmember Yates?
I'd like to say, when it comes to the setting the city onto a good course of development, structure, cost savings, in programs where we're able to see what the city's doing, Eric's done a great job. I believe that his heart is with our community to do what's right. Most people would say, give me that raise. But he's worked hard, and what he's been able to save us is so much more than what we're going to, give him a little bonus right now. Tonight we were told that there's an additional, I think it was $2 million that came in through one area of our budget. That's a substantial sum, when not too long ago we were in the negative range. And yes, we do need to make sure we don't just go out and spend it on a wild night downtown.
Final Friday.
Yeah, but I'm sure that Eric will be there to, if we start going in that direction, he'll help remind us, stay on track. I do agree with Linda, a little bit more input from Eric on to what areas are priorities for goals, because Eric sees the big picture. And sometimes the goals that we may put towards the back could be easily accomplished right now with little effort. It's because he sees the big part of the plan more than we do. So that would be kind of nice to help herd the cats. So, thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Votes have been cast. Let the record show 5 ayes and 2 nays, the 2 nays being Councilmember Russell and Barentine.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to move on to council member choice. Would anybody like to kick us off this evening?
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez?
Yeah, I would just like to make sure the family and friends of Chris Clay know that they are in our thoughts and prayers. She was a great citizen. We were lucky to have her, and she will be greatly missed. And I also want to welcome our new city attorney. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates?
Also like to greet Allison, and I'm looking forward to a new chapter for our city. So I know you have a lot to learn over the next month or two. So I'll try not to bug you any more than I absolutely have to. And I do have a question this evening for Lorette Barentine, Councilmember Lorette Barentine. When we were talking about the fire line issue, I was not real sure if it was a matter of easement or if it was a matter of the design and engineering of the pad. I'm just curious. What was the major concern there?
You want to take it up now? Yeah, go ahead.
And that the Grove did not put this section in as part of their plan, and I was specific in that Section 4 says that it will be done per their plan, but they didn't include this as part of their plan.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilmember Yates?
No, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson?
I, too, want to express my condolences to the Clay family, and I have fond memories of building Habitat homes with her, and I believe the Habitat community is probably coming around to be of support to her family, too, but she's in my prayers, or the family's in my prayers and thoughts. I did want to go back to the upgrade, and I'm not sure if you made a phone call about the upgrade with the software for, so I went back to reread it. I had clicked on the wrong one when you were all talking about it. I thought, I am totally lost here. When I read that, I thought what it was saying was that if we don't stay in continuation of our contract with them, then we get charged. Is that what that meant? Yes, okay. It just needs to grammatically probably be said a little differently so it's really clear. Because that's when I read it, I thought I didn't see any problem with it.
It's not written in the best manner possible.
Yeah.
But if you do reread it, and it says that if we leave the state system,
then we have to pay for it.
Your commitment, then we have to pay for the cost of the upgrade.
Yeah. That's when I went back and looked at it again after all. I probably shouldn't have been, but it bugged me.
I caught that at the podium, but there is no cost.
Yeah.
As long as we stay in the state system.
Okay. Probably just needs to be written. Thank you.
We are kind of time sensitive.
Are we? Do we need to re-bring it up? Would you like me to
solve that tonight? It would be beneficial to.
I am willing to bring that up then and to bring it to a vote.
We did have a motion that was passed to table it to our next meeting. I suppose an additional motion to bring it up now would be appropriate. Ms. McKinney-Brown?
Can we not do that?
Typically, under Robert's rules, once an action has been taken, the table to a time certain, you have to go to the president.
I suppose we could go to a motion to reconsider. What do you think about that?
He doesn't like what you said.
Well, hearing that our operations would like to have this done.
Perhaps a better question is, what is the timetable that you're under? Because maybe we can wait 2 weeks. Okay, then let's follow our rules tonight and go on in 2 weeks.
Councilmember Russell might want to just get in on this discussion real quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, all I was going to say about that is that in the agenda thing, they're not even going to do the upgrades until September. It's between September and December, so
contract.
We do have some
Takes
time.
a long time to do upgrades, though, and for an entire state. I can imagine they're lining it up, but sounds like we can wait. It was bugging me.
Can we wait? I mean, I'm hearing from PD that they would like to get it done tonight, is what I heard.
Well, he just said that they can wait 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
That
was helpful. Thank you.
I think that's it.
Thank you. Moving on to Councilmember Barentine.
Also, my heart goes out to Chris Clay and her daughter, Haley. What a blessing, what a gift she gave her daughter when she got so involved in her community. So many people looking out after her daughter now, and more ways than I could have even imagined, and that was a wonderful gift she gave to her daughter. So, but it's still a very difficult thing, but she's got a lot of people looking out after her. So I did want to bring up an issue with the just the way that the resolution, the 12A1 was, or I was written. I have a concern anytime it's put in a document that at an executive session that council came to a consensus to do anything. Again, I believe that the open meetings law says that in executive session no decision is supposed to be made, and I have a problem coming and documenting that we made a decision in an executive session. At least that's the way that it appears, and I would prefer that it wasn't written that way. We still have to come to a vote, and that's where the discussion and decision happens. Also, then a second request that I have is on the information that we were given from acting city attorney on the EURA. We were approached by, or told by community development that we could just go ahead and get $50,000 from the Englewood Urban Renewal Authority, and I've checked into that. His legal opinion was that the Colorado Revised Statutes direct the URA to cooperate with other public bodies. None of the Colorado Revised Statutes or any legal information is really given in here, so I checked with some other entities to get a little bit more information, and it depends on where the revenue comes from. If the revenue came from tax increment, then it has to go back to pay the bonds, and this is just my opinion and my read on it and the information I got. If it came from the sale of the property, then they have some leeway in what to do with it, only because the Colorado Revised Statutes don't specifically address it. It doesn't prohibit it, it doesn't allow it, but it doesn't prohibit it either, probably because they never really understood they'd be doing that. According to their last budget, they have about $1.2 million, and we are unsure on whether they have given us all the money, what deal they're on with the property with Medici, but it is my understanding that if we close the EURA, since they don't have a current project going on and they have no debt, that all of their money then would revert to us, to the municipality. It would go back to us. And so the concern at that presentation for the upgrades for the 3400 block or for downtown was whether they should be giving us more or not. And I believe that we ought to be pursuing closing them down, and then we wouldn't have to worry about asking them for more. We would take the entire $1.2 million, and then we can make some decisions on it. Another issue that was brought up in this documentation from the acting city attorney was that it was done in compliance with the downtown development project. And I have documentation the downtown development project was closed down in 2000, I believe, or 2001. However, if we are going to be using these funds in accordance with the document, even though it's no longer in effect, then we need to go back and make sure Medici was done in accordance with that document, because there were covenants put in, there were issues going on, and I'm not sure that the Medici project is in compliance with the original downtown development project as it was. So if we could take a look at some of these, and then maybe this council could put it on their agenda to look at closing EURA and then putting that money to good use, and hopefully maybe with the original intention of how it was collected. The first thing I guess we need to do is make sure how those revenues came to us, because that will determine whether we can, what we do with those revenues or not. If they came from TIF, it is a possibility that we may have to give them back to the entities if that still exists. And there is some documentation to show that maybe we might have gotten the last TIF increment on some of this in 2007 or 2008, but when you're going back 20, 30 years on something, it gets a little muddy. So if we could get that information, and then if council would like to consider closing the EURA so that we could go ahead and then control those funds and do something amazing with it. And then if anything in the future comes up, we can always get 20 or 25 signatures and create another EURA if we should find blight and slum in the city. And that's all I had.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell?
Oh, and welcome. I think I gave you a lot there. I'm sorry about that. Nice to have you on board finally with everything that was going on. I hope you watched the tapes. You were occasionally mentioned, and you have been eagerly anticipated. So thanks for still coming.
My heart goes out to the family of Chris Clay as well, and I got to know Chris pretty well in the last year and a half, and Haley, and I am very grateful that she did get involved and that there is a great support system for Haley and for the family. So my thoughts and prayers go out to them as well. And welcome, Allison. It's very good to have you here. And it seems like it's been forever, but now it just seems like yesterday. So thank you.
We've been waiting to say that you're not in Kansas anymore.
Let's see. Oh, I do. I hate to put you to work, but you probably just have to ask someone for this. Would it be possible to get a copy of the sex offender ordinance, the new wording that was on that?
Thank you. Going back to Mayor's Choice, I did just want to second everybody's condolences and thoughts and prayers with the Clay family. Again, Chris Clay was an invaluable part of our community. And second, again, the welcoming of City Attorney Ms. McKinney Brown. Welcome again, and looking forward to working with you. Finally, I just wanted to throw out that this Saturday at 6 p.m. is the MOA opening reception for their new artist, and so please join me in welcoming that on Saturday night if you got time. Moving on to City Manager's Choice.
I don't have anything this evening, Council, other than say thanks again for allowing me some time off last week. I enjoyed some time with family in Ohio.
Thank you. Do you want to go over the agenda for the 10th?
I can, sir. So the agenda for the 10th, of course, my computer just went to sleep. Bear with me.
There's not enough on this one.
We have gone through it recently. We've got a Transportation Advisory Committee coming, the Water and Sewer Board coming.
Police building status update.
Police building status update. We got Chatfield Reservoir environmental pool discussion. We did talk about putting budgeting ahead of council policy and procedures at our last meeting. We want to make sure that we get through to the budgeting presentation that we skipped last time around. The 17th, right now we're not scheduled for a study session prior. I would suggest, I suppose, to council that we consider catching up with our budgeting conversation. I thought I heard some concern last time we did some scheduling about wanting to sort of catch up on the next step of that. So I guess, I would suggest that we just put another placeholder on the 17th for continuation of budgeting for community goals review.
You can do that, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson?
So what we're going to still leave budgeting for community goals on the 10th, right? And
Correct.
move it up to maybe underneath the two board, under the water and sewer and water and sewer and transportation, maybe put it under there so it's right there.
Sure. My thought is that we would probably have a fair amount of guests with police and Chatfield Reservoir.
Correct.
Are those outside presenters? Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
CBRE will be attending to talk to you about the police building, specifically the architectural design portion. And then there's a member either from the Greenway Foundation or Denver Water who will be here to talk to us about the Chatfield Reservoir Pool. I'll be assisting with that since I sit on, as well as Councilmember Olson, on the South Platte Working Group where this idea emanated from, so there will be outside guests there. What we can do, obviously, is to present what we were going to present on the 27th last week on the 10th for the budget, and then we can try to figure out how we can work in a department or two in the hour ahead of the regular meeting on the 17th to do the presentation there.
I just want to make sure that we don't rob more goals reviewing if we're worried about this for you.
We'll get there.
Thank you. Moving on to future study session topics, is there any questions or comments regarding the 27th on? I did hear some requests to put urban renewal onto a future study session topic list. If it's not already there, I believe it is not, so if that could get added perhaps.
I'll add that right away, sir. Thank
you. Other comments or questions? Councilmember Barentine?
Are we going to be able to add that before we make some more decisions on, I appreciate the conversation that we had on the streetscape, but at the chamber meeting, it started sounding like we had already made some decisions on, we're going to move forward with some things, but we don't have money yet. So I was hoping to kind of combine that discussion with the URA and what's going on with a decision which we have not made final yet on the streetscape issues and how much we're going to do and the timeline on that. So when was the next time we were going to have a presentation on
funding of the streets?
Or where was the time? Yeah, when was the timeline for that?
Yeah, I don't see Broadway coming back here, so it probably needs to come back in answering a lot of these sort of funding questions that we had at our previous study session. Perhaps that's something for the 17th as well. If we feel like we could at least get those questions answered so that we could decide whether or not we wanted to move forward with the funding or whether or not we had to tackle the ultimate question of the urban renewal's future, or whether we can de-link those and take those sort of one at a time.
That would be fine.
Councilmember Olson?
Are you talking now about April 17th being both the budgeting for community goals and that?
Correct.
Just 1 hour. I think I just really don't want to have us keep pushing this budgeting for community goals around. We haven't been doing it. When we get to the budget, everybody gets upset, says we haven't been talking about this.
Sure. We set that for, I think, 35 minutes, I want to say, last time.
I would say
do you
more.
recall how long?
Now that we've done none, it seems to me like we should take the whole hour for it.
Well, Councilor, I really appreciate that because this is of utmost importance to us as staff as well as it is to council to do this. I think you're going to gain a lot of headway at your meeting next week on the 10th with the budget. However, I'm concerned because we had proposed to actually start to have departments come and start presenting to you, but understanding the importance of Broadway to the council as well as to the businesses that are down there, I think we'll need to find a way to weave that in. The difficulty will be, as Councilor Barentine has raised this evening, some very salient points on how that funding could be utilized from EURA. There's some legal aspects that need to be examined with the dissolution, potential dissolution, as well as practicality purposes of going back and seeing if, in fact, there is a requirement that any tax increment that has been generated there, seeking those entities to give that back. But
again, knowing that we're going to deal with some of the budgeting issues on the 10th, I do feel comfortable having both those items on the 17th. Any further comments or questions regarding that issue?
Is there consensus for that, Council?
Do I need it?
I just disagree. I'm really concerned that we just keep pushing these things off and we're never talking about the budget. And then when it comes around, we berate you for not having brought it up and given us enough time. So I don't want right, Councilmember Russell? So I just want to make sure. I'd say 45 minutes for it because we go on forever and ever in good ways, asking tough questions, and I think we need to set aside the time for it. If you think Broadway is 15 minutes, great.
That sounds fine with me. Why don't we set April 17th for 45 minutes for budgeting and 15 minutes for Broadway? Any further discussion on this topic? Councilmember Barentine.
No, I was going to suggest that if we end up running into any kind of concerns, then the budgeting is the priority. And if it needs, then we may need to consider a separate meeting for that, which I would be more than willing to do. If we run into that, I guess we can see how it goes. But the budget and the money is our job.
Thank you. Further discussion of Councilmember Russell?
I agree that the budgeting is the most important thing, and I would rather stick it in on a night on a study session where we had a lot of things, if on the Broadway streetscape, if we needed to do that. So I think we should set April 17th totally for budgeting. And if we finished 5 minutes early instead of coming in here 5 minutes late.
Do others, I guess, want to continue to weigh in on this issue? Councilmember Barentine?
Is there a possibility that, if we're going to do the EURA on the 17th, I suppose it could be fairly straightforward if we're able to have all the answers to those questions first. So it would be then a decision of whether people are willing to want that money or not. So it's a possibility that might not be as long as that, and it could be, yeah.
That's my hope. And,
That's
you know,
fine.
again,
I see
we
what
are
you're
giving
saying.
priority very clearly in my mind to budgeting by scheduling it for the majority of that time. It is just my hope that we can get some of these legal questions answered by the 17th so we can keep this Broadway project moving. If there is an issue with funding and we need to tackle this urban renewal issue, then at least we will be put on notice of that and can begin to schedule that conversation. Councilmember Martinez?
I would prefer to have the entire study session on the 17th be dedicated to the budget. Like it's been brought up before, we keep kind of pushing it back, and I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about it. So I would prefer to have that study session dedicated to that topic.
Thank you. Further discussion on this issue?
I'll support that as well. I wouldn't mind having a few minutes extra between there and here.
Okay.
I'm in agreement also.
That being said, we will schedule the entire hour on the 17th to budgeting. I'll suggest then, perhaps then, that we, what do you guys feel about council policy and procedures? Again, I would like to get these Broadway questions answered, so perhaps putting Broadway answers for next week then. How do you guys feel about that? Councilmember Barentine.
That's a good suggestion. I wasn't thinking you were going to do that, but yeah.
Thank you. Anybody have any major issue
My
with
concern
that?
is that we're talking about this, and once again, we've excited people that we're going to go ahead and do something in a timely manner, and voting for this in December and going to help the businesses down there. So if we're going to do something and move forward, then I would prefer we did it in a timely manner. So I'd like to do it on the 10th if we can get the information. Same thing, I still don't think it'll take a lot of time. It's a decision of whether people want to.
Thank you. I'll suggest it get added to the 10th agenda as the last item. And time permitting, we might be able to get to that conversation on the 10th. Any further discussion, perhaps on the 24th out? Seeing none, I'll move it back to city manager's choice. Anything else, sir?
I don't have anything further, sir.
City attorney's choice.
I have no report this evening.
Thank you. And with that, we are hereby adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
No way. Before 10 o'clock?
Impressive.
Remember, we started at 7. Don't want to be a wet blanket, but
We're
it's
getting better.
than 1, that's for sure.
I know it's not.
Council, if you could stick around and sign the proclamation for Mr. Cohn, I would appreciate it.